Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Atcast, a podcast for the study of a modern visual culture. I'm your friendly neighborhood arbiter of heaven and hell, Soup.
Can I be the soon arbiter?
Okay, sure. Are you the arbiter of what is a soon and what is also soon?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
I mean, you're the friendly one, so there has to be like a contrast, right?
Oh,
You know?
okay, I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
this week, AT stands for Afterlife Trial, because we'll be talking about Death Parade. But before we
Yay.
get into that, what have you been up to?
Me, oh my god. So the past month or so, I've been up to nothing.
Okay.
And then finally, in the past 2 weeks, it's been everything.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing, which we talked about last time that we were going to talk about, was I went to go see Captain Marvel.
Nice. I also went to see Captain Marvel.
Okay, good. What did you think about it?
I thought it was solidly okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was good, but I just I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Just continue. We'll talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, we could talk about it. That seems to be the general impression, right? And I think that's kind of how I felt too, was like there were some like really good moments of like, yeah, femalehood and such.
Uh-huh.
But like it didn't like for me do anything super different from the usual action superhero movie, which I think is actually good in this case because I think it just kind of like it needed to not be bad, right? But I think we need like more movies like this with where you know it has it's about the female protagonist, you know, she's becoming a superhero, whatever, and it's not like anything. What am I trying to say? Like
women also deserve mediocre superhero movies. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I think I would actually tend to agree there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right though. The bar was so sort of low that it just needed to not be bad, which is why Wonder Woman was so good because it just wasn't bad.
Which I kind of want to watch Wonder Woman to be able to better articulate the differences or whatever, because it seemed like Wonder Woman had a much better reception compared to this movie, and I'm not sure why, because you know I haven't watched it. But I do have friends who like were also kind of disappointed by Wonder Woman, and then watching this, they were basically like, I mean, both were like okay.
Yeah, like what I would say is that at least for Wonder Woman, it was much more refreshing of a story because it's naturally not gonna follow the like Marvel superhero format. So
Right.
as a result, you know, even though it's nice and refreshing that we get like, oh, we get our female superhero, she's really strong and cool, right? Well,
Right.
I mean, yeah, but like it's also pretty much the same as every other Marvel movie that exists. So we have still seen it before. And
Yeah.
you know, with the DC stuff, we're not quite as played out on that yet because, you know, we're a little bit far out from like Batman, so
Right. That's a really good point. Yeah, I think in terms of like fitting Captain Marvel into the universe and what exists in terms of Marvel cinema already, it fits in nicely because it is just like a lot of the other movies, but it tells, you know, Captain Marvel's unique story. But it does follow the same kind of like themes, I guess, or the same general feel, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I would say honestly, like if I was going to place this movie at any point in like what order you should watch Marvel movies in, I would probably watch this like immediately after Captain America. Like I would honestly put this about like I would just watch them chronologically in terms of like in-game storyline, but like because the thing that was kind of about this movie to me, I think, was because I was not expecting it to be set up and progressing the way it was. I thought it was going to be like, oh, now she's Captain Marvel in the future. No, it was just the background story. And I didn't realize that was going to be the movie. And because I had no expectations going, I was like, okay, I'll just go see the cool new Marvel movie.
Right.
And I spent the whole time wondering, so is this like going to be the whole movie? And then like halfway to like 3/4 of the way through, I was like, okay, yeah, this is the whole movie. Now I can enjoy it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because I also went in with zero expectations, and I didn't know what they were going to portray about Captain Marvel. And I did assume that, you know, at some point she's going to be, you know, the iconic look of Captain Marvel. But yeah, I was a little surprised that it was like all about just her origin story, and then only at the end does it culminate into so this is how she becomes Captain Marvel. I don't think it was a necessarily bad approach to it.
No.
It was just like a little bit like, oh, okay, so this is what it's gonna be.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just very run of the mill. You know, it feels like every other Marvel movie. And
yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that that's honest. Like, that's not a bad thing.
No, I mean, if you like Marvel movies, then you'll like this.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who will very much like this movie, and I'm sure have already watched and enjoyed this movie. And it does a couple of things like really well that I think we're like, oh, that's cool, because I don't know anything about Captain Marvel because I don't read comic books really. So going into it, I was like wondering like, and then like it actually sort of addressed the things that it was like about, and I was like, okay, all right, yeah, I can see it. I can get into this, and there were a couple of moments where I was like, oh yeah.
Okay,
like
so give me an example. Well,
okay,
minor
so like
spoiler territory, but yeah,
no, heavy spoiler territory. Just like the last like moment where she blasts that dude that was like her trainer or whatever, where he's just like, you have to stop being emotional, and she's like, fuck you, right?
Yeah.
I think that moment when she's just like, you know, fuck all this noise was great. I think that whole sequence was great.
Yeah, no, when she was basically like, I don't have to prove anything to you. I was like, bruh.
Right. I was
this
like,
speaks to every generation of woman ever.
That's it. That's what I wanted.
The moment, yeah.
I could tell they were setting that up immediately because they were just like, you have to stop being emotional. I'm like,
yeah, there it is.
That's it. So, you know, I'm glad that even if it proceeded somewhat predictably, I'm kind of okay with the way that it played out. I honestly wasn't expecting them to just like pull the like turnaround where it's like, oh, by the way, we're actually just space fascists. I was like, oh, you actually are going to talk about that. Cool. Right? It's like, I see. You're actually going to address this whole... Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I appreciated that.
And it wasn't like... I mean, it wasn't bad, so... That's cool, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it was, like, particularly good, but it wasn't bad.
No, I think it...
And then the movie overall, I think, was, like, solidly good.
Yeah, I think it would cater toward people who... like the whole flip of like, oh, the weird alien looking people are actually the good guys, you know, in the whole, you know, they're portrayed as bad guys this whole time, but actually they're good. And, you know, they have a society and a culture and they're just trying to get by. I think it caters to people who like that kind of twist. For me, the most compelling characters were the best friend and the daughter. Like they were the most interesting to me.
Yeah, this is a problem that I think a lot of Marvel movies have, honestly, where they have really interesting side characters that don't get foregrounded.
Exactly. And I was just like, why is this the case? And then I was like, oh, but it usually is the case with these movies.
Yes, yeah.
I think maybe that's...
It also sort of coincides with this like unfortunate trend of always casting like white people in the leading roles, and then like the people of color are always the supporting characters that are usually much more interesting. So in some respects, it's kind of like, well, maybe someday we can have a movie where we don't need that, you know, white person in the lead, and we can just have the interesting movie about the interesting character. But, you know, that's a discussion for a sort of deeper dive into the movie. Yeah, I like the setup of like, well, it's Captain Marvel. She's like, what is it, like 80s, 90s, I think, and she's super strong. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm into it. I kind of really enjoyed all the like tongue-in-cheek, winky face like throwbacks to the 90s. It's like, look, Samuel L. Jackson has hair, and he...
Oh yeah, they were really in your face about how 90s it was.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, by the way, here's all Blockbuster. I was like, okay, all right. Yeah.
And then right after that, they show a Radio Shack. I was like, man, they're going all in.
Right, it's like, okay, I see what you're doing. That's cute. Yeah, I really enjoyed the like setup to the other Marvel movies where it's just like, oh, this is you know, Nick Fury coming up with the Avengers Initiative. I also like that his eye patch was like not a big deal. Like they just kind of played it off as a joke because I almost feel like it would be worse if it was like a really serious, like, oh, I lost this in the war or whatever.
Yeah. I love that
Right?
it was because of the cat thing. That
It
wasn't a
was
cat
just the
thing.
cat, and then it wasn't a cat. I love that too. That was funny.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
a lot of what it does is cute, and even if it's not particularly like amazing, it is valuable in its existence. And I thought it was
Yeah.
a solidly good movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was also more interested in all the side characters, but you know.
Yeah, me too. But it's fine.
But yeah, I'm really just like, I watched it and I was like, oh, that was like a fun kind of like almost like a buddy cop sort of a sort of movie.
Yeah, like her and Samuel L. Jackson just kind of like doing their buddy cop routine thing. That was fine.
I will say, I think one of my favorite things, honestly, was the sort of like faithfulness to the 90s era in approaching the like government space program stuff, right? I think that's always really interesting. That's an aesthetic that I think is really interesting, and it reminded me a lot of Men in Black, which is funny.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
I kind of almost wish we had more of that and less of the like, oh, by the way, also like everything here is from aliens. It's like, well, yeah, okay, but what if people invented cool things? I mean, that's a minor gripe. I don't really care that much about it. But yeah, if there was a little bit more of that, I would be like, oh, this is kind of neat, because I think that's a lot of what Marvel is about. It's like, oh yeah, this is like where the people have like their cool secret technology, right? Because that's what Black Panther was about, and Captain America too, right? So
yeah,
I think the movie had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
potential.
I think so too. For me, I would have liked for it to play up a bit more of the like cultural differences between the Kree and Earth, right?
Yeah.
I think they did fine in terms of like she's just fine with walking around in her full armor or whatever, and hijacking communication devices and souping them up, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I would have liked to see a bit more, like a little more dimensions to it, kind of thing. Because then right after that, she kind of sinks into being human, which makes sense because she does have memories from Earth. She's from Earth. But I would have liked to see a little bit more roundedness, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think also I would have liked to see, because I think a lot of the people who like feel ostracized about this movie, about like, oh, the white man, some of that has to do with potentially because all of her past traumas or her past negative experiences were all experienced like in relation to like white dudes, right? Whenever like her dad was a scummy white guy, her army mates were also really, misogynistic, like terrible white dudes. I would have liked to see like less of a categorical like denouncement of like, because obviously not all white dudes are like that, but I would have liked to see like a bit of like, oh, there is like someone in her past that was a white dude and was okay, right? Instead of like a huge generalization of,
Yeah.
of that. Like just a bit more nuanced discussion is all. But I also understand why they did that, obviously, because, male white power.
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly just, I'm kind of just fine with the way it is. It's
Okay.
because like it's not, I don't think it's like really aiming for any kind of real moral complexity.
Okay.
Because I think it's just sort of like, well, I mean, this is just like how it was in the 90s, which is true.
Oh, no, yeah, no, it's super true, yeah, and that's why I didn't have a problem with the examples that they gave, but I would have liked to see a bit more nuance, but I also understand, like, it's a generalized, like, simplification of what was going on in that time and what was happening with her, so...
Yeah.
I think that was just, like, a little bit... It's not a huge point, but it was just, like, a little... Oh, I could have... Kind of would have liked to see that, but it's fine.
I think also like the attention of the movie gets split a little bit, by which I mean a lot of it, because it's basically like Captain Marvel and Nick Fury get to share a movie, and it's just like, I kind of would have been fine with just like a Nick Fury movie, but
yeah,
I mean I'm glad that Captain Marvel is still like technically the main character of this.
It is a bit of origin story for the both of them.
Right, because it's like it's cool that it's like, well, she's the reason that the Avengers exist. That's neat. And then But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, well, this movie was co-starring like Brie Larson and Samuel L. Jackson, because it almost feels like all the Nick Fury stuff kind of gets shoved in afterwards.
That's a good point. I guess in that case, like, even though I liked the Nick Fury stuff, I kind of would have liked to see him have less of a role, because then that would have given Captain Marvel more time for her character to more like develop. Because for me, I think they could have done more with like showing her character development. Like, not that what they did was bad, because what they did was fine, but I kind of like it would have given her more time to do so, as opposed to sharing the screen time. But you know, whatever. I mean, it does, like, I did like how they wrapped it up in the like the end scene where she kind of just pops up.
I do think that some of the other stuff was some of the stuff they did in the movie is pretty cool. Like, they did some of the achronological storytelling where they have like, oh, this is the memory, and then like they alter it because it's like she's a person, but she's also got like the implanted alien memories, and I thought that was cool. Like, I like the way that the scene kept changing every time she looked at it, and you're like,
yeah,
ooh, what's happening?
Yeah, you're right. I did really, really like that sequence, because they were like, you know, focus on this, and then they keep like playing back the memory until she focuses on it. That was really cool. Yeah.
I thought those sequences were probably the highlight of the movie. I think those are the coolest ones.
And when she was busting out with the giant things on her hands.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Yeah, I think it was fine.
A solidly okay movie. Yeah, solidly okay to good, I would say.
Yeah, I went with a bunch of my lady coworkers, and they really liked it, so I was like, cool.
There you go. All right, so what else have you been up to?
So I also finished Kingdom Hearts 3.
Okay.
Overall, I would say it was a good game. I enjoyed most of it. It also, like, the problem that I had with it and why I have like slightly mixed feelings about it is because despite the fact that there were way more positive things than there were negative things in terms of like the gameplay experience and you know, overall impressions of it, some of like the high points of the game, like the super high points where I was getting really excited and like so into the game, I was like, yes, this is it, you know, were swiftly followed by like the worst moments of the entire game for me. It was like kind of like building up to like a mountain, right? You're climbing up the mountain, you're like, yeah, this is awesome, and you get to the top and you're like, oh my god, the view is amazing, I'm so glad that I climbed this mountain, and then someone behind you shoves you off and then you plummet.
Oh wow.
And so like last time I gave the example of like the Pirates world, right, where you know, I was getting so excited and then suddenly crabs. The ending of the game was like that for me, where I'll announce when I get into like the spoiler, but like basically the entire boss sequence, right, was so fun. I was like, oh my gosh, this battle is really cool. And they were giving like throwbacks to like the previous games. Like if you as a player played from the first game, like Kingdom Hearts 1, I mean, and then played up until now, like at least 1 and 2, like they give you such good feeling throwbacks to those games. I'm like, oh my god, yes, this is so good. And then they had like, you know, the friendship feels with Donald and Goofy, and then they bring in all the other characters, and like it's a really good sequence for me. And then they get to the ending sequence, you know, the cutscenes, and I'm like, oh, this is so great. You get to see everyone, and they're all like, you know, getting along, and it's a beautiful moment. And then the very last second.
Okay.
Legitimately the last second of the ending was like, I understand because Kingdom Hearts needs to continue, right?
Oh no,
because they that was
my question, is like, is it over?
It's not over.
Oh my god, it's not over.
The only part that is over is the whole Xehanort arc. So they're done with that bad guy.
I thought that was the whole thing.
No, it's not the whole thing.
Oh god.
So the impression that you would get from this game is like, because the whole like Sora and Riku and Kairi arc, right? Like you feel like that this would be the end of their story and that maybe they would move on to other characters, right? Because it almost feels like they're getting tired of writing for them. Is the impression that I almost got from this game. It's just like, oh, Sora lost his powers again. We gotta freaking go get him again. Like, it felt like they were gonna just be done with it, right? But the way that they ended it at the very, very last second, I was screaming, Soup. I was like, just stop! There's a clip of me on Twitch where I am raging. And and of course, like the entire game, they're referring to this innocuous black box, and Maleficent and Pete are trying to find this black box, even though they explicitly say that they don't know what's in this box. They just know that they need to find it. And throughout the game, they keep like shoehorning in these cutscenes that like also end very abruptly, right? Where they're looking for this box. And then it isn't until like this epilogue scene, which I think I heard that it wasn't even added until like it was like a patch or something, like they patched it in. But it was an epilogue scene where they address this black box and then they show it. And then that's it.
Oh, I see. So basically what's inside the box is Kingdom Hearts 4. They open it up and it's the goddamn game card. Just like, oh, look, it's Kingdom Hearts 4. I guess we should load this up.
Oh, that would have been so good. No, what they did was the epilogue, I guess, ties into the previous games and basically the entire like Keyblade War thing.
Keyblade War?
Yeah, there was a Keyblade War in the prequel, whatever, and
okay.
You know, yeah, so it ties into those characters and whatnot, and I don't know. I just wanted this whole thing to be over, but of course it can't be because I guess the future Kingdom Hearts games will also still have still star Sora and Riku in some way, which I think it's tired, Soup. I think it's tired. I love those characters, but I think it's tired.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, I think it's fine if they're gonna be in the future games, but I would have actually liked to see them in reduced roles, kind of like, oh, they're still there doing awesome Kingdom Hearts, Keyblade, whatever things. But I think the series really needs a fresh start, and I thought this was gonna end it so that they could have one.
See, the thing is, I feel like it wouldn't really be that hard to just sort of end it and then start a new one. Because
yeah.
You have so much to draw upon.
I know.
And it seems weird to me that after it took like 15 years to get Kingdom Hearts 3 or whatever, that you wouldn't want to start that again.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just like, shouldn't it just, I don't know, be over? And like
all of it? No, they can't because Kingdom Hearts makes way too much money. But
well, yeah, but they can make like a new generation of Kingdom Hearts games.
That's what I want. I wanted a new generation, right? And maybe they will in the next games. But the way that it's set up and the way that they have like the secret ending or whatever, like if you get all of these like hidden lucky emblems throughout the game, which you legitimately
if you get,
need
like,
a guide
holocrabs.
for. Yeah, you have to get a guide for these emblems because there's virtually no way. Like some of these ones that I went and looked for were like in such obscure, tiny hidden locations in giant maps that you would drive yourself nuts trying to look for them without a guide. And so if you get all these lucky emblems, you get a secret cutscene, which, spoilers, I guess, shows Sora waking up in modern day Shibuya, and the way that they set up the environment. The way that they set up the environment, it looks like the Shibuya from The World Ends With You. Okay,
all right, sure.
So
I thought you were gonna say like the real ass Shibuya.
The real Shibuya. I was like, no.
Is this? I'm getting like flashbacks. I'm getting flashbacks to Nier Automata. Or I guess it's not on Nier Automata, it's the other Nier games. But like,
yeah.
Yoko Taro, are you here?
then suddenly 2B shows up, and you're like, ah!
I might actually start playing Kingdom Hearts if that was the case.
No. I mean, I think the whole, like, the idea of a crossover between the games is fine because, you know, The World Ends With You was a fine game. But yeah, it just kind of pissed me off a lot because the whole game, you're like, oh my god, the kids are together, and then they throw in the whole Kairi is again, spoilers for the end, but Kairi got kidnapped again. She's separated from Sora again. And then you have to go find her again because she is the eternal damsel in distress in this game, even though she finally has a Keyblade and she's been training with it. I was so excited because I was like, oh my god, maybe finally I get to play with Sora, Riku, and Kairi together because they are finally all together and they all have Keyblades. But no.
So, hang on.
No, you don't.
What you're telling me is that there is another character that they could use for this game that they're not going to use?
Well, the only time that you get to party with her is you get to party with her and Axel during one boss fight towards the end.
Oh, good.
Which is fine. Like that was a good moment, but also like there was so much potential for you to have partied with these people way earlier in the game.
Oh my god.
It would have been so cool if you could switch out party members, or maybe like I think it would have been awesome if, you know, because 1 and 2, and on many of the other games, whenever you're playing as Sora, you're partied with Donald and Goofy, which is awesome because they're the bros, they're your triad, right? Or your trio, I mean, and what would have been, like, I think emotionally moving is if, you know, something happens where you're separated from Donald and Goofy. And so instead, you get to explore the game with these other characters, but maybe there's a sense of like, oh man, it doesn't feel right without Donald and Goofy. And then it starts to culminate into a moment where you, Sora, get to go for your bros and like, I don't know, maybe that was like off-brand for Kingdom Hearts, which I get, but I think it would have been a really good opportunity in this game to help change things up from the usual formula, because like I said, it felt tired. It felt like they were like done with the pretenses of whatever, and they were just gonna roll with what it is because it's formulaic.
I feel like we're like veering dangerously into Bleach territory, which is like I don't know how you can manage to do that in a world that's populated by every Disney story imaginable. I don't get it.
Yeah, it felt very much like they wanted to play it safe.
See,
and by doing so, it resulted in a 35-hour game that felt unfulfilling.
This is why we like just need to outlaw sequels for like maybe 10 or 20 years, because I feel like it's really not that hard to just start something else in a different world that is similar or in the same world but later or whatever, right? Like even Kingdom Hearts does this because they have like prequels and sequels and whateverquels, right?
Yeah.
And it's weird to me that they're like, better tell more stories about Sora. What? But why? Yeah. Can't we be done with this? All right. There's like God knows, like there's like 15 Final Fantasies and they just make a new one every time mostly. Sort of. Yeah,
I mean, and again, I don't mean to lay into Kingdom Hearts 3 that badly. Like I said, it was an enjoyable experience. I think the potential that could have been there, considering the long wait, was enormous. And I think a lot of people overall kind of felt the sense of like disappointment after playing it because their expectations were so high. There were people who legitimately enjoyed the game, like start to finish, like loved every moment of it, and they're very excited for the next games, and I'm so happy for them because this game was made for them. It wasn't specifically made for someone like me who like sees like a lot of these missed opportunities and kind of wanted a bit of a change up kind of thing. But I guess like kind of the setup that they gave for the next game is that they'll be able to kind of change it up, but again, it's a whole lot of like Sora, Riku, and Kairi being separated again, right? So I don't know.
Yep.
It's very, very tiresome.
See, it kind of reminds me of like in 2011, there was an adaptation of The Three Musketeers, which ends on a scene that heavily implies a sequel, and there never was one. Like one of the I think one of the antagonists gets like disgraced or whatever, and she's like chased out of the court. I don't actually remember. It's because it's been I don't know 8 years since I've seen it, but then she's like, I will have my revenge, and then like comes in with a fleet of airships, and then the movie just ends, and you're like, oh, that was the end of the movie, and then you're like, well, I guess when does the sequel come out? It's not. It doesn't exist. It's never going to exist. So
maybe they had plans for it, and then they didn't get approved.
I'm sure they did, right? But it's just like, I'm done with sequels. Like, honestly, even, and like, I swear, I don't know why, but it feels like there's every opportunity for people to do sequels well, and they don't. And I don't know if that's like, well, I'm going to have to assume that it's like financial pressure, because that makes sense. And because it frustrates me, because like it's possible to do sequels well. In fact, it's possible to do sequels really well. Like, I mean, like, especially like game franchises, like it is every opportunity for you to just improve on what the last one was and make it better. Because I think that Ace Attorney is a pretty good example of this until recently, where I mean, the first sequel was but the third game was awesome in that series. And then the Apollo Justice game that came out as like the mainline series game that was like next in line was awesome. It was it's legitimately like the best game in the franchise. And then they come out with more sequels, and then suddenly it's not as good. I mean, mind you, I still like it because I like Ace Attorney and I like those characters and the world and the game mechanic. But I mean, it's like you set up, and this is me complaining a little bit about the Ace Attorney series. They set up Apollo Justice as the main character in the game Apollo Justice. And then they don't use him as the main character. So the whole game is about Apollo Justice becoming like a new attorney. Like he's a new attorney. He's like following the same arc as Phoenix Wright, except in this game Phoenix Wright is like a disgraced, disbarred lawyer, and you have to figure out what happened. And it's like this whole like overarching mystery, and it's super cool and really well done and well put together. And then the next game, Phoenix Wright is the main character again, and you're like, why? Right? It's like at that point you've sort of veered out of the territory of making legitimate sequels and into just making the same formulaic thing over and over again. It's like,
oh no! So they treated the whole Apollo Justice thing kind of like a side story almost. Or like
it really did, because it really feels like it was a side story, because God knows that it's supposed to be a mainline game, but then the stuff that is in it is like really important and relevant to the story, but only because it's like the pivotal crux of like the timeline, and not because it is the passing of the torch to Apollo, which the whole game foregrounds as like the point. Okay.
So wait, so it was a well-received game, right?
Oh yeah, Apollo Justice was great. It was like an incredible game. It was like a very good like passing of the torch story. And
so that doesn't make any sense that they would regress, right?
Yeah, they like backtracked on pretty much everything that happened, and it was like not in a good way.
Because usually that would happen with something that was badly received.
No.
Huh.
It's funny because in some respects, Fire Emblem is like less guilty of doing this with games like Awakening, where like Awakening happened and they're like, oh, this stuff is really well received. And then they just did that stuff more to the point where it wasn't well received. But that's just because, I don't know, baby voids, and God, fuck that noise. But
baby voids.
I'll never be over how bad those were. Anyway, but they at least tried to double down on what they thought was popular about the game. And for the Ace Attorney series, it just feels like, well, I mean, let's just go back to Phoenix Wright doing stuff, because like he's like the main character of the series, right? Like, is a topic I'm very passionate about. If I start talking about it, I'll talk about it forever. So I'm gonna just sort of like push that aside for now.
That's interesting. Okay.
I'm kind of done with sequels, for at least for a little bit. You know,
I think I agree that there's a whole lot of potential, and I think it is a shame that they regressed after actually doing good sequels.
I know.
If you're gonna decide to go that route, you might as well just end it. Just
put it out of its misery.
If you're gonna regress and that's the only option for you, just end it, which I know a lot of these companies can't. Maybe they got some pressure from above that was just like,
I'm sure they did.
We want to go back to Phoenix, right, though, so just, like, enough with this apology justice crap.
Yeah, I mean, if it feels like that's exactly what happened, it's like...
Yeah, and so then they made some half-hearted Phoenix Wright ones instead.
Yeah, I mean, mind you, they were like... okay to good games. I was just confused as to why Apollo Justice is not, I don't know, the main character. Because, like, that's the point.
That was the point of his game. Yeah, no, I get ya.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, Kingdom Hearts 3, just fine. Yeah, just a couple of things that I didn't like about it, but overall, it was fine. I liked it. What else? Because I'm talking way too much about stuff I did. Really quickly, I went to a Muse concert. It was freaking fantastic. I love Muse to the depths of my soul. I feel like my heart melted a million times over. I'm still not fully over it. My body was so sore after the concert because I was jumping around so much.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. I loved it. Once in a lifetime experience, unless I get to see them again, in which case, you know, rad. And yeah, I finished some anime. I finished Run with the Wind, which also made my heart melt into just an indiscernible puddle. I really love that anime. Such a good sword anime. Probably one of my favorite. And I watched a Chinese donghua called 魔道祖师, which my friend recommended to me because she was like, oh, it's actually a really well animated Chinese yaoi. And I was just like, excuse me? Those two words don't belong together, as in Chinese and yaoi. Because China does not do that, right?
I mean, generally speaking, no.
Yeah, exactly. So I watched it and I was just like, I mean, I sense the tension, but this could also be misconstrued as, like, tension between rivals, not necessarily people who are interested in each other. So I was like, why did she say it was a yaoi? And so I decided out of curiosity to check out the novel that it's based on because maybe there were discrepancies there. And that's where the yaoi is. They, for the animation, removed any and all mention of homosexuality, which I was like, this is very China. This is the China that I know.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I'm actually really surprised that the novel was published in the first place, right? Because you know how they be.
Right.
And, but yeah, the fact that this novel was then made into an animation is also additionally shocking. And it makes sense that they would remove the homosexual references because, you know, people don't want to suddenly disappear the next day for making an animation. So, yeah, I can recommend it because it is actually a really competent animation. The fight scenes are really pretty. It is like, you don't expect a Chinese quote-unquote anime to be any kind of decent quality because a lot of the ones that you and I have seen at least were like way out there and the pacing was so off, and there are some pacing issues at least in the beginning and then they kind of iron themselves out later on. It's a historical kind of ish drama, which China is like has been doing for centuries, so they're good at it.
Listen, 14th century, all about that romance of the Three Kingdoms. They love that shit.
Exactly. And it is around that era, too. This story is placed around that era.
I took a class, and we covered some of the stuff that happened in that era. I learned about the Battle of the Red Cliff.
There you go.
It was neat.
No, they made an excellent movie a couple of years back about that, and it's great, yeah.
Now I understand that moment in Awakening where they run the ships, and I was like,
there you go.
It's a reference.
There you go. It is. Yes, they love referencing that. Yeah, so if you want something a little bit different from your typical run-of-the-mill anime, then this could be something to check out. Like I said, there's basically no references to homosexuality, which the insulting part of it.
So hang on.
Okay.
I had to look this up to like make sure, but yeah, I follow a couple people who are really into this, and it seems super gay.
It is. It is. Listen, but the thing is that what they did with the animation is that rather than having this character be referenced as like he's homosexual, right? They have this character. So they call him a lunatic in the anime because he lost his mind due to some circumstances in his past. Mm-hmm. And this character, instead of being homosexual, they say that he's a lunatic, but also he's a pervert who lusts after anything that's beautiful, whether it's a plant, whether it's a human, whether it's an animal. That's how they describe it. And I was just like, so
I see.
That's what you replace the homosexuality with. So very Chinese, like I said.
Yep. That's
yeah. So if you want more of a genuine experience to how the story originally was, you can check out the novel. It is translated on some fan sites. And yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
also, just as a preface, the character names very, very easy to confuse if you're not used to, watching something that's Chinese, because everyone has the same surname, and differences in surnames mean the world in this particular series because it has a lot to do with clans and families and stuff like that. So if you need to make note of it, do so. There's also like guides and stuff online that will
do a relationship really chart.
Exactly, but if you just watch it like cold or whatever, it's fine. The beginning will feel like an info dump that they'll like explain later on. So if you can get your mind around the beginning, then
all right,
that's good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. I've been talking so long. Oh my God, Soup, stop me.
Okay. I will stop you. But first.
Yes.
I was going to say that at least sort of like Chinese independent creators do put out some gay stuff, especially webcomic artists.
Yes, I'm so happy for these people that brave the waters, and they're like, you're not going to stop us from the gay.
I don't think there's anything better than gay Chinese webtoons. It's just something else. It's something else. Because like I feel like the thing is that Japanese webtoons read a lot like manga, and Korean webtoons are like really dramatic and sometimes very, very horny. Like a lot of them are just straight up smut, or like literal just like porn. And then like Chinese webtoons, I feel like I read a lot of gay ones. But yeah,
there's a lot of repression there, so they have to express it.
It has to leak out somewhere onto the internet.
Very strongly.
Well, I had spring break, which was pretty fun. I did a lot of hanging out and cooking and stuff. It's good. I started playing Minecraft again for some godforsaken reason, and that was boy, I lost so much time to Minecraft. I swear to God, I started playing and then like I woke up like 8 hours later and I was like, oh my God, I'm still playing.
Bro, I recently started playing Don't Starve again because I want to actually beat the game or get to like the quote unquote ending or epilogue or whatever.
Yeah.
And man, it's been a trip.
Yeah. I mean, I will say like Minecraft is pretty much as I remember it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm playing a modded version, mind you, but yeah, still lots of fun playing with a bunch of people because you all just kind of pile your resources together, and that means I don't have to ever go mining, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, you don't have to mine in your Minecraft.
I just craft. It's super fun. Yeah. Aside from that, I haven't really been up to that much, to be honest. I've done a lot of like lazing around. Like I slept for like 15 hours the first day I was able to, and then like last night I think I legitimately slept for like 6, and then
do some maths here.
I literally have to do some maths. I think I legitimately slept for anywhere from 16 to 20 hours.
Oh my God.
I was just tired, man.
You accrued a lot of sleep debt over your semester. Your
I really
quarter.
have. And then like I got up and I was like, okay, I gotta watch Death Parade because I have. Funnily enough, I have not been able to watch it until like right now.
Spring break.
I've been busy. I've been busy. But yeah, I watched episodes from the OVA all the way to the final episode today.
Bejeezles.
So
man, you really sank into it.
I'm really cutting it close, but it's okay because the show was really engaging. So
oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was fine. Yeah. I mean, that's a good enough segue. I feel like to sort of get into it. Let's talk about Death Parade.
Yes.
So Death Parade is a 2015 anime written, created, and directed by Yuzuru Tachikawa under Studio Madhouse. Tachikawa is notable for his directorial work on both seasons of Mob Psycho, which is really,
I didn't know he did
good.
Mob Psycho.
He did, yeah, he does Mob Psycho. It's so good. He's so good.
He's so good, yeah.
I mean, you can see it in Death Parade. Death Parade is awesome, but yeah, it is originally based on a short film called Death Billiards, created for the Young Animator Training Project's Anime Mirai 2013. So this is, I mean, thank the Japanese government for this one. That's where the money came from. I rarely thank the Japanese government for anything, but I guess thanks for Death Parade.
Thanks for Death Parade, Japanese government.
Boy, that phrase is contentious.
Feels weird, man.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't want to take that anywhere else in history and say it.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. So, Death Parade is a show about purgatory, where souls are sent to be judged, and then they either go to heaven or hell, and they're judged by arbiters, which are like people like puppets, and they oversee stress games. Yes.
Stress games is a good way to put it.
Yeah, they do stress games, and then they go to heaven or hell, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, they explore a lot of different themes and a lot of different like areas of the human psyche, which I can appreciate.
Yeah. The opening is by Bradio, and it's just so good. Oh my! The opening is the first thing that anyone ever notices about this show, and like, there's a good reason for that.
Yes,
because it's awesome.
It's awesome. I've fortunately gotten the chance to see them in concert. If you ever get the chance to do so, they put on an amazing show. Oh my god!
I bet they do. Yeah, they have a really great energy to them.
Yes.
But yeah, it sounds like a Bradio song, and that's all I need to tell you about it. If you know what that sounds like, you know.
And if you don't know, then
you will.
By all means, check it out. Yeah,
you will know. Yeah.
At the very least, Google the freaking opening.
You should definitely watch the opening. If nothing else, because one, give you like a wildly inappropriate vision of what this anime is, and two, it's just a good old time.
It is a good time. I love how deeply it contrasts with the show.
I honestly think
like they need it.
Well, I was gonna say, I honestly think that's fine, because everything else about the show is like really heavy and can get really dark, and then the opening cuts in and you're like, I'm having a great time.
I was like, oh, there's light in this world.
Yeah, so the animation is by Studio Madhouse, and it's so good.
It's really good.
It's so good. It's better in the short film, but that's because the nature of the short film is like, it's not a televised animation, and they can spend a lot of time on very little actual animation.
Yes.
But it's still really good, and a lot of the energy that is in the OVA carry over into the show in like a really good way. Like, there's lots of cool elevator scenes. I was really into the elevator scenes. I don't know why.
It's a really beautiful elevator.
Yeah, it's good. I liked the last one with Mayu, where she's like holding that like dude. I thought that one was done really well. Yeah, I thought that was awesome. And then of course the sort of climax of the whole show, right? The denouement. The best piece of animation is by far the ice skate, the figure skating scene.
Yeah. If
which
you
was
have like any kind of
oof.
like action scene or a scene that has like a lot of fine movement, just give it to Madhouse.
Honestly. Yeah, I mean, Madhouse is responsible for the first season of One Punch Man and not the second. And as a result, it was amazing and people really, really took to it.
Yeah. They also did Dororo.
They also did Dororo, which is so good. The OVA especially is like awesome because there's a scene where this guy, like this just like sort of 30-year-old man fights an old man with a pool stick, and they like have just like a sword fighting sequence, and I was like,
it was so great.
I'm really about this.
Yeah, it's like I'm so here. I did not expect this, but I'm here for it.
Yeah. So it's like really nice. It's really fun and dynamic to watch, even when they're just like talking to each other. I think they do a really great job of deciding when to use motion and when not to. I think even the small sort of subtle things like the when the arbiters get information, like the memories, and their eyes just go whoa, whoa, whoa,
their
whoa, whoa.
eyes. Yeah.
I think that's really cool. There's like a lot of little details, like all the arbiters have like this like weird cross-shaped pupil. Or what's that called? Is that the iris? I think it's the iris.
Yes, they have crosses in their iris.
Yeah, they have this like cool like color cross in their iris, which I think is neat as shit.
Yeah, it's really cool. They all have very distinct personalities, and their bars also have very distinct personalities, which is great.
Yeah. I thought a lot of really good work goes into background and like setting. Like a lot of it looks very, very pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, watching it back, I was like, wow.
Yeah. They also like a lot of the tone is set by what color everything is, which I think is really cool. Like Queen Dekim is like this really coolly lit sort of not very it has a very like high class feel to it. Right? Whereas Ginty's bar is like really kind of warm and inviting. Yeah. It feels a lot like a local Japanese bar. And
exactly, yes.
It kind of reflects like how he's like hot-headed and not as like rational as Dekim is, but also like, you know, how he secretly cares.
Yeah, he's very casual about it, you know. That's why his bar feels kind of more cozy in that sense.
Yeah.
And it doesn't also I love that it's smaller because that means it kind of shows like how he's not super open, I guess, at the same time, you know? Like, he only lets a few people in kind of thing, versus Dekim, where his bar is a lot more, I guess, has a really huge open space, and there's, like, I don't know, like a freaking pond in there, and
right. Also,
jellyfish and stuff.
Like, Nono's floor is also really cool, because it's, like, this house in the middle of this rolling hill, and there's, like, trees everywhere. It's, like, this really, really... In contrast to everywhere else, it's a very organic space, which is very fitting for her character.
Yeah. So, I love all the different environments that they take you.
Yeah, so they do a lot of really good work at showing you what a character is like tonally through the use of the background and the environment, which it's like a lot of people won't notice it, but they'll feel it.
They'll feel it, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
So
sure.
You want to talk about the characters?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite one?
First. My favorite. I really love Dekim, of course.
Like, of course,
He's a main character that I actually super adore, which, you know, sometimes it's like hit or miss a lot of times with main characters, you know?
I think
like
that's
try to
true.
Make them,
I think his role is like really that of like an observer, and I think we get that a lot. Like it feels a lot like I'm watching something like Mushishi. Actually, he looks like the main character of Mushishi.
Yeah, which is also like another of my favorite anime, so it makes sense that I would super love this one too.
I mean, that makes sense because Mushishi is basically like Kino's journey, but different.
Yeah, no, all of my favorite anime basically are a lot like this, where it's like a third party observer kind of coming in and like observing like a situation that's going on, or like maybe they're moderating it a bit, but otherwise it's mostly the other characters that are moving the story along.
Yeah.
I love stories like that. I don't know.
I also really enjoy stories like that. And I think it really works for this format and what story it's trying to tell. because it's supposed to be a little bit like an anthology of these stories with something else happening in the background and like this sort of line of continuity progressing. I think the continuity in this one is a little bit stronger than in Mushishi and Kino's Journey.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's really on purpose. Like I think there's supposed to be that feeling of a forward progression that's happening.
No, yeah, I like the development, especially in Dekim's character, that you get to see kind of like from the beginning to the end.
Right.
And how his story like is so heavily affected by Chiyuki. Yeah, I also really loved Mayu. Like, oh my god.
Mayu is so good.
She was so good. There was so much characterization for her in just the one episode. I was like, oh my god, everything this girl does is so good.
She's honestly the best of anyone. I think
anyone.
If I had to choose a favorite character, I think this is tough for me because I like the design of a lot of characters.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
But I think maybe my favorite character is Quinn.
Oh, really?
I kind of just like her like weird sort of I just talk too much and I got a cool jeweling eye magnifying glass and I have a husky voice and I like to drink. I don't know. I just think she's really interesting.
Yeah. No, yeah, I kind of wish that we got to learn a bit more about her, but I also understand that, you know, she plays more of a background role kind of thing,
right.
Yeah.
I think I'm always more drawn to background characters anyway.
Sure.
Just
Makes
like
sense.
on principle.
I have to be.
It always feels a little bit like I accidentally get attached to the weird background characters they don't expect you to. And I'm like, how did I get here? Why did I do this again?
You're just such a hipster nonconformist.
I know, I'm just a weird
know.
hipster nonconformist. It's true. I think Dekim and Ginty are probably tied for second, just because I love Dekim, but Yoshimasa Hosoya is like, oh yeah. His voice acting is so good, especially if you give him the chance to be like a little bit sexy. Do you know what I mean? Like
I don't think I've heard him be sexy.
Okay, when he's allowed to be like a little bit sort of not a good guy, like he has this really great like it's like a vibrato or something to his voice that is just excellent. Okay. Because he voices what I'm thinking of, he voices Belial in Grand Blue Fantasy, who is a very over-the-top, like, sexual character. But the delivery of his lines is so excellent. Like, it's mind-blowing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we get a little bit of it in his introduction episode. Right? A little bit of the, like, I'm not nice. Right?
I'm not good.
Yeah, so I was very into that. I love Nona's design.
Oh, Nona's design is so good. I love her.
I like her like tied up hair, and it's like, you know, I didn't know what to describe that as, but I'm into it. No. I like the color of it.
No, yeah, it's
her
really
cool floofy pants.
Yes, I love her suspenders and how she just hangs her arms in them, because that's definitely a thing that people do.
Yeah, I think overall the character design is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really strong, and the characters are all very different, and you can remember each one.
The only one that I'm like kind of about is Clavis. I think he's like maybe a little bit too much. It almost feels a little bit like every time I look at him, my eyes are trying to like chew him. They're just like they're just like okay, no, something's wrong here. This is not what I expected. It's like, I feel like every angle you see something new, you're like, wait a minute, he's got a little bit of yellow hair. Wait a minute, he's shaved there. Is that a nose ring?
I love that his color palette for his hair looks kind of like an Electrike from Pokemon.
It does. I think it's just that his hair seems so like all over the place. It's part of why I don't like him.
He has a bit of like that rocker look, you know? Like,
right, but it doesn't feel...
and the hair color.
it feels like really like weirdly inconsistent to me, and even though I know it's like consistent in my mind, but like I look at it and I'm like, I don't know about that one.
I'm fine with him. He's fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay. I think the problem is that he looks like he's like halfway between like two character designs that I would like, and as a result, I don't. Like if they had committed to giving him like a shaved side, or if they had committed to making him just green hair bishy.
In the back, it is shaved.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. It feels like they didn't commit to the undercut.
Well, it's hard to see because they usually show him from a frontal view, but there are a couple of times where you see him from the side. It's like, oh, okay, there's the undercut.
Yeah, I know, but like I look at it and I'm like, you could have done better with that one. Or if he like held his hair in a way where I could see it, I feel like that would be better. Listen, overall, just I'm very about the whole hair thing. Very about it. I think it could have been better.
Okay.
Did you have a favorite character? Or did you say?
I think it's a tie between Daekim and Mayu. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Mayu was really good. I love Mayu a lot.
I love Mayu.
Okay. Let's talk about music.
Yeah.
It's good. I mean,
the music is dope.
I wish I was better at talking about music. I'm kind of trash at talking about music. It's kind of jazzy. It's good. It's it is backgrounded and foregrounded when it needs to be. It complements the mood. It's anime music. It works. It
works. A lot of nice piano music.
Yeah,
in the bars
I like the piano music, and I like it. The piano music was like diegetic, where it was like sometimes like he would make the doll play the piano.
Yep.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I I think just just a straight transition into other stuff about the show. But I like the fact that a lot of the story and a lot of the setup is very implied, and we don't get to see it. Like I like that we don't know anything about the person who came to be judged, who was the piano player, and we never do.
Yeah,
and that's not something they ever go into. But
yes.
Like I like that there are things that nobody remembers, and that's okay.
Yeah, because sometimes the arbiters have their memories wiped, and so even they don't remember certain
and
things that happen.
It introduces like a really great thing about Daekim as somebody who like has kind of this inkling of humanity in him, right? Where he feels like they need to be remembered in some way. Even if he can't remember them, like he'll give the dolls that are like the clothes that they had and like put them in places where they might have been, right? I think that's really cool, and I like that that's a part of his character.
Yeah, I love it a lot, and even like the ending sequence where you get to see all the dolls, and there's just like this mysterious like wavy haired doll that they keep showing. You don't know anything about her. And that's a vibe that you get from the show, too, is like not all questions are going to be answered. And that's just how things are in the world.
Yeah,
right?
this show asks a lot of questions and like proposes a lot of and like prompts a lot of questions. And it doesn't answer most of them. And I think that can be frustrating. But I also think that that's fine. I like it as like I had that feeling at the end of this show where I was like, I really want more of this. But then I thought to myself, but I'm kind of okay with not having more of this.
Yeah.
Like
I think it's a tenuous balance.
I like that we get a little bit of just like a snapshot of the workings of the tower and the implication that something will change, but not necessarily the follow through with that. And I think that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that they kind of have that potential, and so they are able to make a sequel if they want to, but they don't necessarily have to because they told a solid story already.
And I also think that you know, in the way that the thematics of the show work is that it's honestly fine, right?
Yeah.
If we don't get those questions answered, because like that's the point. Like
it's to make you think about it, but also like kind of immerse yourself in the environment, right? Not not everything you know in life is going to be answered, but
right,
especially in concerning purgatory and the afterlife.
Right, it makes you feel in a lot more by yourself than it actually telling you something, which is, I mean, it's a very like more at this point classical form of storytelling.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy the fact that they don't like ham fist every single like aspect or detail or whatever. Like look at our world, you must know everything about it, kind of thing.
Right, but I do like that we get a lot of it, even directly and indirectly. Like I love that they have this crafted mythos of what death in the afterlife is like, and that's the setup of the show, and they utilize it really well, and I think they use it to tell the stories that are appropriate to tell with that kind of setting. And I'm like very interested in the subtle ways that it informs us about like what the show itself thinks. And I love that, like, you know, heaven as a concept is reincarnation, right? That implies very different things in like an Asian space, right? Because it's like, you know, in a traditional sort of East Asian sense, in like a Buddhist view, reincarnation is what you do because you suck. And you keep doing it until you don't suck enough to go to heaven.
Right, yeah.
Right? And that is juxtaposed with hell, which is just like the screaming void, or so they say. It kind of becomes unclear as to what it actually is at the end of the show, and whether or not the characters are telling the truth because they don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. Like I think it's okay that we don't get those questions answered.
Yeah, I also like the whole premise that it builds on in terms of like the souls that come to Queen Dekim or any of these bars are like they come under a very, very specific circumstance, which is it's a pair of people who died at the exact same time. And they may or may not be related to each other, right? Maybe they were in the same accident or whatever, or they were in completely different, separate places in the world. You don't know. But but because of that specific circumstance, they're judged at the same time and they're pitted against each other in a stress contest, essentially.
Yeah, I think most of the time they are related, mostly because like that's the setup of the story. That's what makes it an interesting story. But also just because like, I mean, probability and like dying at the same time. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting setup, and I like that the setup is that they have to play a game, and they might come to and as they play the game, they get more and more of their memories back, and
it makes for some really interesting storytelling, because even the arbiters don't know what memories they'll get back as they play. So
yeah, I was very into this setup, and it does do a little bit of this like backwards fill in like mystery story. I think that's always kind of neat. Like I like when a story isn't necessarily given entirely chronologically. And this does it really well, because it's, you know, obviously like these people don't remember what they were doing before they died, or that they're even dead.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm like reflecting on some of the ones that really emotionally like
the stories it tells are really impactful, and it's impressive that they managed to build a narrative that feels compelling every couple of episodes or every episode, and at the same time make it not feel like two stories are the same. Right? It does a really good job at varying the themes and the kind of like almost like the kind of morals it wants you to take away every episode, which I think is really good. And it's also emblematic of stories like this and Kino's Journey and Mushishi. Like there's a lot of this like happenstance and circumstance, and like it's ultimately about these micro conflicts between individual people. And I think that's why those stories are so good, because you go in knowing that the setup is going to be that you have your central characters and they might have stuff going on, but ultimately like the story of the day is about other people, and so you kind of focus on that.
Yeah, I love that kind of world building, and I like that in this series they kind of some of the pairs are obviously related, but other times, one of the ones that was probably most powerful for me was the arcade one, because it has two people who you wouldn't really expect to like meet each other at all, right? And of course they didn't in their living, when they were alive, and they put them in a space where they have to interact with each other and kind of like orchestrate this game between each other. And the story that they tell at the end was like so like, wow.
That's and I think that the show does a brilliant job of doing this, but the show makes you question what's happening because it doesn't do what you expect it to, but in a way that makes sense in the context of the story. Like, I think that when I'm not entirely sure about this, but in the first episode, when the couple get their sentences, right?
Yes.
I felt immediately, I was like, well, like she's just saying that so that he feels less bad.
Yes.
Right? Like she's literally sacrificing herself for him.
Yep. Like you could tell because she walks away, right? And she says all that stuff, like she's getting her composure kind of thing together before she says it. There's
a lot of these like visual contextual clues that you get. And this happens later too. With the murder case. I think that there's a really strong moment where she's like, yeah, I did all that crap and this isn't your baby, right? And all these things that will hurt him but ultimately will absolve him of the guilt of killing both of them. Yeah. And she gets sentenced to hell, essentially. Like
she gets tossed into the void, and I think it also brilliantly sets up why Chiyuki as a character was needed, right? For Dekim to develop as a character, because she in the next episode is just like, that was messed up. I'm really glad, because like I think it is possible for that to be like even a little bit too subtle. I feel like people will be like, well, okay, that makes sense, right? But like the fact that they address it in the next episode, and they go back to it, definitely needed to be. And,
it needed to be clear, and they did it.
There was also like another thing that I kind of wish that they had subtitled, actually, that a Japanese viewer would get, but an English viewing person might not, is... So, how she has this story about like, oh, the person that they're referring to as Machi, she's this girl named Machida Yuki. She's a classmate that we used to know. In the credits, when they're showing the wedding, right, after they've been sentenced, they show an invitation card with her name on it that you wouldn't get as an English viewer unless they subtitled it. And so I kind of wish that they did that so that you get that same experience as a Japanese viewer, like, oh, so she was telling the truth kind of thing. And then it leads into the second episode where they're like, yeah, she was telling the truth. She was just trying to save him. Yeah. Yeah. Either way it gets shown, but yeah.
And I feel like I liked that the second episode was just a review of the first episode, but through a different lens. But it wasn't done in a way that was like boring to watch. You're like, like you get another perspective on it. Yeah, it's well paced, and it's a fresh perspective on it, which is important, because that's like the whole point of the show, is that you need a fresh perspective on what happens in this place, right? So I think the way that the show is framed is really consistent with the way that the show operates. And I like that he's like, oh, I made a mistake, right? And and like, yeah, he did, and you can't take it back. And it immediately presents the seed of doubt where you're like, okay, so they can be wrong, right? Like, this judgment can be wrong. Yes. Or like, because like they can't tell if people are lying.
Right. There's no absolute system, which I love that they have it like that. It's kind of like the civil system in Psycho-Pass, where they're trying to make an absolute judgment system that can judge people fairly and in accordance to their crimes. But there's always going to be a flaw. Like, there's no perfect way to do this. Like, even though these arbiters are dummies in a sense, they're not allowed to feel emotion. It's the whole arc with Dekim is that they need to be able to feel emotion, to be able to understand human emotion, and to be able to judge them accordingly. Because he didn't understand Machiko's emotions at that time that he didn't realize that she was lying, and that she was doing all of that out of love for her husband.
And then she gets sentenced to the void.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I love that Nona kind of wraps it up. Like, first of all, she like disciplines him in a sense or scolds him, right? And then after that, she's like, well, that guy was never going to trust anyone.
Right.
He's not capable of it. Yeah. And so this was going to happen one way or another. They weren't going to have a happy life.
Yeah. So I think it's really, because like, I think naturally in the course of the episode, you're supposed to feel like he's like sort of in the wrong.
Right.
And that he's just being like paranoid. And then like when that turnaround happens, you have that moment where you're like, oh, yeah, okay. Right. Where, you know, if you don't know she's lying, right, then naturally you would just be like, well, why are you such a jerk? And then, you know, justice gets served. And then at the end, you're like, oh, no, it wasn't actually. This is a very complicated situation.
Mm-hmm. Because she did have an affair, but because, you know, she felt such remorse for it, it just further led into, like, the whole, like, why she would sacrifice herself for him. Like, in addition to, like, loving him, absolutely, she felt guilty because he was kind of justified in feeling paranoid, right? Because she did have a one-time fling with someone.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
It's very interesting, the judgments that it makes, but it is sure to inform us that they're not like absolute, and that they're not supposed to be like absolute moral judgments, and that and that judgments are always fallible, and that there's like so much to consider in doing a judgment that it's almost like, you know, it's almost like the judgment is where the problem is. Where it feels like, you know, why are we even attempting to do this at all? And I think it would be easy for that to be the only message in the show, but I think it does a good job of also complicating that by introducing characters that clearly have like understandable motivations, but are still like so twisted that you have to imagine that like they can't be allowed to like be reincarnated or whatever. Because like, I think the implication is, it's a little bit ambiguous, but the implication is that reincarnation is like the good one because that's where all the nice people go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And has the white mask and smiling versus
right, exactly.
The demon mask on the other one.
Yeah, and so there's like, right, like the murder case, which was, boy, that was an interesting one.
What a wild ride!
It literally felt like I was watching a Phoenix Wright game like case play out.
Yeah,
in like the best way possible.
Half an hour.
Oh yeah, I mean it was 2 episodes long, but yeah, the like twists and turns that it took were so interesting, and like mind you, like big content warning for like sexual assault and like you know, violence. There's I mean, naturally, like this is a show about like really dark things, and we probably should have put this at the beginning, about really dark things and death and mortality and all the sort of darkness of human hearts. So there is like, you know, sexual assault and there is domestic violence, and those are things that
to me,
make an appearance.
It thankfully isn't like a gore festival kind of thing. It's not like there to be like, I don't know, like Quentin Tarantino levels of like in your face kind of thing. It's just like, that's what happened to these people, and that's why their souls ended up being so twisted. Right.
It's pretty tastefully done, all things considered. But it's, you know, obviously like it's still a thing that there. we should bring up. But yeah, so like it's, and I mean like the murder case is really interesting because you think, and there's a process to watching these episodes where you are trying to figure out yourself whether or not they're guilty or not, right? And the reason it's so interesting is because it takes so many twists where you're like, okay, I mean, I have a hunch that maybe like this person is like the person who's going to get sentenced, and it turns into this like thing that spirals completely out of control. Where, you know, the detective, after realizing, he's like, you know, like, oh, sacrifices need to be made so that people can be brought to justice or whatever. And then he's like, well, you have the choice of hurting this man. And even though she's like, this is part of your judgment, like, you have to stop this. Like, he can't help himself
Yeah.
but to do that, and
Yep.
even though you know that he's like a like a loving brother, and that he works so hard for his family, and that his circumstances have led him to be in a situation where this is the case, right? It's still like he's still, and even though he knows that it's gonna reflect upon him poorly, even though he knows he's dead, right? All of these things, they end up with him still doing ostensibly the wrong thing, right?
Yeah, I kind of love that whole like. I mean, I know there's some contention in terms of like inevitability of this thing happening, but there's something like wonderfully written about it, right? Like,
Well, I think that it feels like there's always a choice to be made, and I feel like
sure, yeah,
and the choice that that character makes is contextually a wrong one, but makes sense as to why he did it.
exactly. It feels natural, right? It doesn't feel like, oh, suddenly he's a good guy, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. Like, no,
Right.
given what he's been through and how he feels and what his personality is like, it makes sense that he would make this choice.
Yeah. And it's like he knows that he'll be basically sentenced to hell if he does it, but he still does it. Right? And there is a sort of like there's a complexity to it, right? There is nuance to it that gets lost in a simple yes or no, bad, good judgment. And
right.
and like the sort of like idea of there being a binary judgment that you can make about a person's morality or a person's like guilt, right? Like they did this bad thing, like they murdered 2 people. Do you sentence them to hell forever? Right? There's a lot of weight to that choice. And the arbiters make that choice, impassively. They make it without knowing what that suffering is going to be like, because that's their job. That's what they're made for. And it feels like, and it feels like there's a real contention there between their job and like what they feel. Because sorry, go.
No, go ahead.
Well, because even Dekim, right? Dekim is like his whole arc is about gaining the ability to understand suffering, right? The ability to understand human emotion. But even Ginty has some sentimentality where he has the Kokeshi dolls with the faces of the people who stuck around, right? So we know that even he cares and he thinks about it and wonders whether he's doing the right thing, even though he's like ostensibly just a doll made for one job, right?
Yeah, he is a lot closer, I guess, to their standard definition of an arbiter versus Dekim, who slowly develops emotions. But I love that conflict between him and Dekim, where like he's constantly frustrated by Dekim's just like existence, right?
Right.
But then even he ends up running into a situation where he's not able to pass judgment, which is on Mayu, right? Specifically.
Right.
That kind of like the way, like you said, where they're trying to pass binary judgment on very gray situations is so interesting, because we have almost, even though our justice system is crazy flawed, we do have the quote unquote benefit of giving more nuanced
right,
sentences. Theoretically, exactly. In an ideal, like everything's working perfectly, quote unquote, we were able to like pass judgments that are a little more gray to fit the grayness of the situation, right? That feel more fitting versus like, oh, everyone gets a death sentence or not kind of thing, or they go free, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does reflect sort of metaphorically on our ideas of justice and our ideas of the law, right?
Right.
You can follow the law and come to a conclusion based on that, but it could still not be correct, and it could still not be considering everything. And the image, like the memories that the arbiters get, impact how they're going to feel, but they acknowledge that it can't be the only thing that they consider, right?
Exactly.
But also,
they can't calculate everything in the heart based on that.
Right, and there's also the idea that the games that they put them through are not necessarily like a good reflection of how to pass judgment on people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that they're supposed to be put under extreme duress, where they think that they're fighting for their lives.
Right.
And And the question becomes, and obviously the answer is like no, but like the question becomes, is that okay? Is that like the way that we should make judgments on people, like by seeing them in situations where they're like at their very lowest, right? Like
Right.
it shows the capacity for all people to have like great darkness in them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no opportunity for them to redeem themselves. You know, it feels
Exactly.
like they're just trying to make something happen. And
Right.
it feels like the setup, and they bring this up in the show. They say like, you know, are you really bringing out the darkness in someone's heart, or are you making it? You know, are you creating it through this situation?
Yeah, that's why again why Chiyuki is so important, because she basically slaps these devices out of Dakinu's hand. It's like, stop it. You're making this worse. It's not something that exists in this person. You're creating a situation where they would have to act like this kind of thing, like the arcade game where like every time, like when he decides to mess with the ladies game, suddenly she reverts to all of the violence that's been reflected on her entire life, and she feels like that's the only way that she can save herself in this situation, and she's not even aware of it. She like comes back to her senses and she realizes, oh my God, I've hurt this person. Like, what have I done?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they almost are always regretful of what they've done, and there's no way for them to atone for it, right?
Exactly.
It feels like maybe the reflection should be like, what do they feel after that, right? That shouldn't they be like judged favorably if they're like, oh God, what have I done, right? Because everyone is prone to impulse and emotion, and they can't necessarily control their actions, but that doesn't reflect like poorly on them morally, right?
Yeah.
It calls into question this idea of moral judgment in the first place. And I love the arcade one as an example of this, because I mean, it's natural that she would turn out that way, because she's been divorced like 3 times, and all of those dudes have been absolute bastards, right? They've been like abusive, and she's just trying to protect her kids. And even though she is like, I mean, she's like a little bit of a diva. You know, she's like, I'm famous. Don't you know who I am? Right. But like at the same time, you know, she is someone who in her entire life has felt like, you know, she's been on the shit end of the stick, and she still feels like she has to do something, like she has to take care of her kids. Right. And, you know, if we had any other story where it was like, you know, mother of 3 kills attacker, right, it would be pretty clear cut what we think of that. I think generally speaking, you know, we think like, well, good, because like she needs to take care of her kids. Like she was defending herself to be able to continue to take care of her kids who, you know, can't be taken care of. But you know, the situation that they're put in is not a fair one. You know, it brings out these qualities, and in a sense, it almost manufactures them, because I don't know if that's 100% true. I think in some cases, like, it is there, right? Like this obviously came as a result of her circumstance, but you know, it's important to consider that, you know, there is putting them in this situation where they think their lives are at stake is going to be like stressful, and that's going to cause people to do things that they might not otherwise do. And in the first place, like, is the moral judgment correct there, where if someone feels a compulsion to protect themselves so that they can protect someone else, like, is that right?
Right. And especially in her case, where it's something that was kind of like forcibly taught onto her, right? It's not like she wanted to be a victim of violence. And yet in a situation where she feels backed into a corner because she was exposed to violence, it's something that she ended up thinking of and reverting to. And so it's like, what do you do with someone who had this experience forced on them, and then it is then perpetuated in their life without them even really wanting to, right?
Right.
So like, do you judge them negatively for that? Or, you know, like, do you say to them like, oh, you should have known better, you shouldn't have chosen that route? But clearly she wasn't even aware of it, right? So,
and like, you know, there's also cases where things are not quite as bleak, right? It's like the second case where it's like, oh, this is like a nice, like happy sort of like after death reconciliation, which I think was really nice. I thought that kind of story was awesome too.
Yes,
and we have the other guy in the arcade case where he's like, I shouldn't have been such a dick. Right? And I shouldn't have killed myself, right? There's a lot of sympathy in this show for people who take their own lives and afterwards feel like they didn't want to do that. And in a sense, like, there is a lot of hope for redemption in this show, despite the fact that a lot of the people who are condemned are people who, have the potential for redemption. And I think that's on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty heavy show. I love any show that's like about, first of all, I love anthology shows and shows about like a lot of like little stories. And second, I love stories that are about like this interim between life and death where people are like figuring out what's happening. I've read a lot of stories like this and I love them. I think they're great. Yeah, I love the OVA too. I don't know if you watched it, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I think the OVA puts it really clearly, and I think obviously because it's like supposed to be contained, a self-contained piece, right? Where it has this this like the guy basically says like people have different circumstances. Like, we were never equal from the moment we stepped in here, even if you think we are, right? And the implication in that short or in the film, right, is that the old man goes to hell. And I mean, at the very least, I think that's like, I think it's very interesting. I think it's like, because we get the view of his memories as well, where he's like going to war, right? Yep. And then he goes ostensibly to hell, and the other guy gets reincarnated, right? That to me is like the first clue that this is like more complicated than it initially appears, and I'm glad that the show really explores that.
Yeah, me
so I was
too.
like, he actually goes to hell.
I love that they didn't necessarily take the easy route for a situation like this, because it could have been, right? It could have been like a systematic, like, you go to heaven, you go to hell, easy calls, right? But the shining strength of this show is how deeply they delve into, or try to at least, into each of these circumstances that are like you don't even know what you would do in that situation, right? If you had to pass judgment on these people.
And like you know that you would act the same as the people who are being judged in the circumstances that they're in. Yeah. Because people under extreme duress act like that. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not hard to get people to be awful to each other, right? Mm-hmm. Where like there's this tension between Dekim, who's just like, I have to understand the complicated emotions and thinkings of people, and Chiyuki, who says people are really simple. Right? And that's not saying like you can boil them down to one thing or you can pass judgment on them so easily. It just means that when you put them in these situations, they will act a certain way, like because they I mean, and Nona says this, like the primal urge is fear, right? Right. Where these people want to survive, and when you put them in situations where they think their life is on the line, then they're going to react negatively, and they're going to think like, I have to get my way out of here or else I will die, even though they're already dead.
Yeah, and it doesn't take into account people, like, it almost favors, in a sense, people who would be more self-sacrificing, right? People who would act good in this kind of situation. But at the same time, the very first case shows how negatively that can turn out, right? Where the most self-sacrificing person is the one that goes to hell.
I mean, that's what's really great is that it's so not clear cut, even though it always comes down to a clear cut choice, right? Yes. Or like it always comes down to a binary choice, even though, and like I love that the idea is that the greatest sort of tenet is self-sacrifice of being able to sacrifice yourself for another person, but then we kind of realize that at the end of the show that's like not the point. Right? We get this idea that like it's okay to not sacrifice yourself so willingly, because there are people that care about you, and like naturally people are going to be sad when you don't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like we have that incredible sequence in the last episode where Chiyuki is just like, I can't take that away from somebody, and then as soon as she starts like crying, she says like, can you like press the button for me, because like she can't bring herself to do it, but she wants it so badly.
Yeah.
And she wants to be absolved of that responsibility, and so she asks him to press it, and then he reveals that it was like just a test the whole time, right? It's like, yeah, she does embody that, but she also embodies like the human aspect of like when you see your like mom crying in front of you over your grave, you want to be able to like reach out and become a real person again and not be dead, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very life affirming in a certain sense.
Yes.
And I think a lot of stories like this are.
That. Yeah. Like, especially when Dakim comes around and starts like realizing like, or he says to these people like you did well, you lived a good life, and how much he appreciates people who live fulfilled lives, even if it was cut short, right? Because death, but he has a high respect for these people who, they did their best in their lives, and even though that didn't necessarily lead to them making good choices, they were still doing their best, right?
Right. Well, that's why I love Mayu, because like she's also like the most self-sacrificing person in the show. And even though her like whole setup is kind of like hilarious, right? Where she like dies because she slips on a bar of soap in the bathroom, right? She ends up being somebody who's like, and mostly as a joke, right? Just like, I have to kill myself before I like pee myself. But she's right.
No, yeah. She ends up being like the most noble person in the entire show.
Right. She still ends up being the most like infallible person. She does nothing wrong, and she can't bring herself to kill another person to bring Harada back. So she just throws herself into the void too, and they like go together. And I like that it's like this kind of, it's almost a lighter hearted story. It's almost like a like obviously it ends in kind of a dark way, but the whole tone of it is much lighter and much more casual.
Yeah.
And I think it. Yeah.
Sorry, I just love that the person that, when they were talking about like you gotta sacrifice someone, and then the person that they show on the screen, like people were
it's
like,
light Yagami.
Yo, that's Kira.
yo, that's Kira though.
Yeah, I love that they chose that.
That's the first thought I had. I was like, yeah, that's Kira.
That you're sacrificing yourself for someone who may not necessarily do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I love that that's like the way that story ended too, that she sticks around for a while, but eventually she just goes. And and I kind of like that, like at the end, like her feelings do get through and they like join souls or whatever. Like I think that last scene in the elevator where like they're both fading away and he's like coming to is really so good. Like I think it's breathtaking.
It's beautiful, and like it still sticks with me because I'm like, no, I wanted them to be happy together, but then I don't know.
The sudden impact of their fall too, where they like shatter into dolls, is so good.
Yeah,
like, every aspect of that scene I think is so incredible, and I love that Mayu is somebody who's just like, I mean, like she just doesn't take any shit.
Like she likes what she likes, and she dresses the way that she dresses because that's what she likes. And even if people judge her negatively for it, she just is who she is.
Right. I love that Mayu is like the example that they use of like, the like sort of perfect person in the show. Like she dresses really godly, and she like devotes herself to a boy she's never met in her life.
Yeah.
But her whole speech is she says like, I may have made choices in my life that other people disagree with, but it's still my life, and I still chose those things. I decided these for myself, and I will continue to live that way because that's my choice. And I think that's that's such a great thing for that person to be the person who is like the one in the right, essentially.
Right. And yet the system that they're part of,
right, the system still the system still can't handle that. It can't process that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I like that, at the end of it, he's, as much as like, he Ginty like kind of outwardly doesn't like her, right?
Yeah.
He still cares.
Yeah.
And he clearly still cares about people who come through his bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really was not expecting to like this show. I thought I would like this show because it's like nice and cool and stylish, and like people generally liked it. But I really ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would.
I'm glad.
It prompts and poses a lot of questions that it doesn't necessarily answer, but I don't think it actually needs to. It says just the amount it needs to say, and then it winks out. It says like
exactly, right. It doesn't overstay its welcome, which is great.
That's like for sure. Like they have this setup where it seems like something's going to change and something's going to happen, but they leave that part to us, and they don't have to go through it, because boy, do I have a lot of questions about what goes on in there. But like,
me too.
Right? It's like, where's like God is gone. Okay, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's
something.
That
several times. Like, there is no God, and then you see old man boy or whatever, old man Lotus man, whatever. He's like, I want to be God, or I'm the closest thing to God.
Right. He's like, I'm the closest one to God right now, and then.
And you have no idea what his deal is about. He just looks sinister.
Right. He just is there. He just plays lots of pool.
Yeah.
So it's very, very unclear as to what a lot of these things will end up being. But I think it's kind of okay. Like, I'm like, honestly, it's almost better that way, I feel like.
Yeah.
I think it sets up a lot of uncertainty about what's to come. But I think that's also the point. I think the point is to set up this uncertainty, because that's what life is like, right? It's full of uncertainties, and you'll never know where you start or where you'll end up. But you just have to take it as it comes, and you have to just live your life.
Yeah, it does a good job of at least getting you to think about it, right? Because that's the important thing. It's not necessarily to answer it for you, but to get you thinking about it so you can draw answers for yourself. Right?
Yeah. It's a very well put together show, and a very enjoyable watch. Like, it's just good to watch too, even though it gets real heavy.
Don't skip the opening.
Don't skip the opening ever. It's so good. So good. I love it. I also love like all the little details they have. They do a lot of like really cool visual foreshadowing. Like when her wrists are like they're like the peeling. Well, it's because she like that's how she killed herself. And then like when she breaks open her knee, it's because she had a knee injury that prevented her from living. Right. I thought that was really cool. I was like,
yes.
Oh. Yeah. And I don't know. It feels like a very sort of human piece of work. Like it feels very much like there's something that it wants to say, and that something is that like people kind of are terrible, but they can also not be terrible sometimes.
Sometimes,
and that's just how it be. It's just how it be. Yeah. I think Death Parade would be like a really great thing to have like a couple OVAs for also, where they just have like different like one-off cases. But I also like that it's so because like the OVA fits right into the like narrative of the story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I also like that every case really affects both Dekim and Chiyuki, and the central arc of the show is about those people who made the choices that they did, and what that led them to, and leading to Chiyuki's final choice of saying like, I can't take that away from people, and even still she wants it. So it always feels like they have a choice to act a certain way, and I think that choice comes at different points in the story every time. And I think it's understandable a lot of the really negative ways that the people being judged react, because, you know, they're here because they're not perfect people. They're not bad people, but they're not good people necessarily either, usually. But they still have to get judged to be good or bad either way anyway. And it clearly does like a lot of damage to just make that judgment one way or another without understanding what it's like to be in that situation, to be under that kind of duress, which is, I think, why it's important that Dekim understands suffering. And it's very interesting to me because it problematizes this idea of impartial judgment, of saying like,
oh yes,
you can make objective judgments about a person based on like what they did or how they are, right? And because like the stated rules of the tower are that arbiters can't feel emotions or death, because then they'll be too close to people. And I think that there is some truth to that, right? Where it is difficult to make judgments, like accurate judgments, if you're too close. But if you're too far, then you don't understand why people do things. And
exactly. Yeah.
You won't be able to consider everything that you need to consider, because you might come to a conclusion that's not right. You might come to a conclusion that is technically right, but is, I mean, we all kind of feel intrinsically that it's not right. Yeah. So yeah, I love this. I love this show. This is going on my list of like really my favorite shows, I think.
Oh, yay.
I feel like it's like the opposite of a tightly written show. Or it is tightly written in some respects. I think the central arcs are done really well, but it's because it's like, it almost feels less like a tightly written narrative and more like a sort of like loosely put together chain, but it's really, really strong still. Right? I don't think it doesn't overstay its welcome for sure, but I think that there's still there would still be room for a little bit more.
Right.
But not to the detriment of the series. Like it doesn't feel like it's missing anything.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if I would call it a tightly written narrative, but I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah,
I don't think that's the kind of story.
The individual stories are quite well written, like they're solid, like they fit exactly within their time frame, kind of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say like it's a condensed like end all be all for this universe. Like they leave so many open ends that it can go in any direction it wants to.
It's incredibly open ended.
Yeah,
and I'm like really heavily okay with it.
Yeah, me too.
All right. I guess that's it then.
That's it.
What are you up to? Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Tumblr and Twitch at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. The next couple of weeks, I don't know. I'll probably be trying to prepare for my next convention, because convention season's coming up.
Nice.
So yeah, I'll be doing a lot of artwork for that, and I'll also be debating what I want to play, having finished Kingdom Hearts 3. I don't know yet. I'm kind of taking a short break from games because I kind of need it. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Nice.
What about you?
You can find me on all the places at Literal Soup. If I'm on a place, it's there. I am not up too much aside from starting school again and like making sure that all of my bureaucracy is taken care of. I need to schedule an appointment for an eye examination, and then once I have the eye examination done, I have to go get new glasses, because mine are technically broken, but I fixed them with super glue, but I don't know how long that'll last. I brought my backup glasses, so those are in my car, which means I'm not totally stranded if I lose these. Okay. But those are also a weaker prescription, so I want to be on those as like for as a little a time as possible. So I need to get on that, but yeah. Other than that, I'm entering my last quarter of school, probably, hopefully, fingers crossed. But yeah,
For the year or for forever?
For technically forever. Hopefully.
Really? This is your last year?
Well, this is my last quarter, so this is my last 10 weeks if everything goes to plan.
Like last quarter of your last year?
Yeah.
Soupy, you grow up so fast. I can't.
I know. I'm
Oh my
really,
god.
I'm on the verge of graduating from college and becoming
Whoa.
an adult in society, which is
Oh
a
my
terrifying
God.
thought. Which is a
I
terrifying
had no
thought.
idea. You were so close to graduating.
No, yeah, I am. I'm very close to graduating. It's true.
Oh.
Listen, you should all just fly over here and we can hang out after graduation. That's all I'm saying.
Let's hang out.
Let's hang out. We can do a live adcast and it will be the most confusing thing ever.
Whoa, we'd be sitting next to each other. That would
Yeah.
be wild.
That's true. It would be really wild. Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay.
Did you Our opening is by Scotty Network and our ending is by Takuma Okada. Be sure to check them out. You can check our Twitter at Absolute Cast, where we'll put updates and cool stuff, and we'll post about episodes and link to stuff. And definitely be sure to check out the video versions. We're gonna get a new one at some point, right?
Yeah, it's
Are you
actually
still working?
I'm in the finishing stages of it right now. Like,
Okay, so it'll probably be up by the time this episode goes up.
oh yeah, it will be.
All right, sick. Yeah. Other than that, did you think of a sign off?
Oh my god, I have to bring up the link. Hang on.
Okay, you have a link.
Because the best thing that I could think of was because we were talking about how I needed to be Majima related. In Yakuza Kiwami 2, Majima gets a construction company.
Okay.
And they sing an anthem dedicated to Majima.
真島建設
Oh, I see.
Let me link you, and then you can skip to the end, and then you'll know what I'm talking about.
Oh my god. Okay, so what you're saying is that you want us to be Majima Construction.
Yeah. Yeah, just like the end part where it's like, that's who we are. We're Goro Majima's Majima Construction. That's who we, yeah, because Sisu, that's the best way to pay tribute to Majima.
Okay, sure. Well, that's who we are. We're Goro Majima's Majima Construction. See you next time. Why not?
Yeah, and then I want you to play the wonderfully inspiring music at the very end.
Oh my god.
And then we'll fade into the actual ending.
Sure.
That's it. That's the podcast.
All right, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for being here.
Goodbye.
Bye.
汗流し進めよう真島真島真島真島真島建設それが我らこの真島真島建設
さようなら、また明日ね。